Title: AITA for not helping my brother who made my life a living hell after finding out he impregnated my wife. And now he's broke, and I'm a millionaire? Throwaway account for obvious reasons. OP. Mid-30s here. This is long, but I need to get it out of my system before I make a decision I can't undo. I grew up with a brother who treated life like a zero-sum game. If I had something, he needed to take it. If I did something, he needed to do it bigger. If I was praised, he needed to make sure I was punished for it later. People call it sibling rivalry. What we had was a campaign. From the outside, we looked normal. Suburban house, 2 boys, tired parents. Inside, it was a gladiator pit with homework. He was the charmer. Teachers loved him, neighbors loved him, even the family dog preferred him, which he'd remind me by patting the couch and saying, "See? Even the dog knows who the alpha is." I was the old soul, which is code for quiet, anxious, and dangerously easy to blame. I remember being 8 and saving allowance for a used Lego set. The day I finally bought it, he took the rare minifigure and lost it in the backyard. When I cried, he tilted his head and said, "You shouldn't get attached to things." That became a theme. If I wanted it, he broke it. If I cared about it, he mocked it. If I earned it, he stole it. He learned early how to perform innocence. He'd throw the first punch, then the hands up not me look when adults walked in. Once he accidentally spilled juice on my science fair project the night before the event. The next morning he was telling our mom, "It's my fault. I'm clumsy. Let me help him redo it." He got praise for being supportive, while I frantically scrawled labels on warped cardboard. He basked in the glow of a halo he forged out of my failures. High school escalated it. He followed me to the same clubs, the same friend groups, the same part-time job. He'd jokingly call me by nicknames I hated in front of people: Professor Buzzkill, Charity Case, B-Team. If I confronted him, I was too sensitive. If I ignored him, I was stuck up. He once flubbed the line in our school play and told everyone I had said something to distract him backstage. It didn't matter that I hadn't. His version traveled faster than any correction. It always did. Our parents' response was a masterclass in conflict avoidance. "You're both wrong." They liked equilibrium more than truth. Anytime I protested, I got a sermon about brotherhood. "He's your only brother," my mom would say like it was a spell. My dad would add, "One day you'll need each other more than you know." Spoiler: he wasn't wrong, just not in the way he imagined. Adulthood didn't fix anything. It just gave him new tools. He learned to weaponize charm in interviews, to borrow contacts, to help with group presentations by taking credit for work he didn't do. I chose a steady, unglamorous career path because I like sleeping at night. He chased shiny roles with shinier business cards, constantly networking, constantly pivoting, constantly shedding blame. When he got laid off, twice, he moved in with me temporarily. He paid me back in attention-grabbing chaos, late-night parties, accidental emails to my boss with screenshots of my private messages. He called it a misclick, and jokes that painted me as unreliable. Relationships? He hovered like a mosquito. The first time I brought a girlfriend to a family barbecue, he wrapped her in an extra-long hug and said, "You're too pretty for my brother. What's the catch?" Everyone laughed. I smiled too, because that's what you do when you're trained to minimize damage by playing along. She dumped me a month later, saying I felt defensive all the time. I did. He created the volatility, then stood in the calm center of it, a concerned bystander to a fire he set. My brother loves nostalgia tours. Anytime I started to advocate for myself, he'd whip out a greatest hits reel. "Remember when we built that fort? Remember the time we got lost on our bikes?" As if one nice afternoon could erase a decade of sabotage. He's talented at building a version of us where we're scrappy, lovable rogues instead of a bully and his favorite chew toy. Everyone prefers that version because it's easier to digest. Even I wanted to believe it sometimes. It's hard to admit you grew up with your enemy. In my late 20s, I met my future wife. I'll call her A. She was smart without the need to broadcast it, warm in a way that made my nervous system exhale. She liked simple things: coffee walks, Sunday farmers markets, thrift store wine glasses. She also liked my family. That last part should have been a relief. Instead, it gave my brother a stage. He turned on the charm to 11. "Hey, you're a saint for dating my brother. Hey, can we get your professional opinion on X?" He'd send her memes, accidentally add her to group texts, performed this role of brother-in-law before the law, like he was pre-screening for a job. If I rolled my eyes, he'd accuse me of being controlling. If I told him to back off, he'd pout about how I never let him be close to anyone. It was the same trap, just with adult props. On our wedding day, he gave a toast that people still talk about. He started sincere, how happy he was for us, how he made me a better man. Then he edged it with poison. I know my brother can be stubborn, but A has the patience of a saint. Cue laughter. He's not the most spontaneous guy, more laughter. At the end, he raised his glass and said, "To A, for choosing him anyway." Everyone said it was funny and sweet. I laughed into my champagne and promised myself not to ruin A's night by picking a fight. Married life with A was my version of somewhere near peace. We weren't rich, but we were stable. I worked hard. She worked harder. We saved. We made small plans that felt enormous. We wanted a kid, but we weren't in a rush. We'd talk baby names in whispers like we were smuggling hope through customs. My brother drifted in and out, dropping by with business opportunities, borrowing tools he never returned, inviting us to parties where he knew I'd be miserable and A would be delighted. I wanted to be a good sport for her sake. He knew that and used it. When A and I finally did get pregnant, my brother was suddenly around all the time. He brought over takeout. He installed a baby gate I hadn't asked for. He showed up with a second-hand glider he insisted would be perfect for late-night feeds. He had opinions about strollers like he'd spent his 20s studying wheels. Every visit ended with a hug for A shoulder punch for me, and some small criticism disguised as help. "You should really baby-proof those outlets. You look tired, man. A needs you to step up." He made me feel like a guest in my own future. The day our son was born, my brother posted a photo before I did, with a caption about how proud he was of his two favorite people. I asked him to take it down. He said I was being dramatic. I didn't make a scene in the hospital because I had a new life sleeping on my chest and a wife who needed rest more than I needed vindication. Becoming a father changed me in all the expected ways. I learned to function on 4 hours of sleep and cold coffee. I learned that a baby's first laugh can reset your entire nervous system. I learned that love can be a verb, not a noun. I also learned that my boundaries were made of wet paper when it came to keeping the peace. I told myself my brother's extras were harmless. He was excited to be an uncle. That's a good thing, right? Meanwhile, he kept doing what he's always done, nibbling at the edges until the pizza's gone. If I planned a Saturday for the three of us, he'd swing by long enough to derail it. If I wanted to do something just me and my son, he'd needle me with, "What? You don't want him to know his family." He wrapped overreach in familial obligation like bacon around a rotten dates. Career-wise, I'd carved out a decent spot. Nothing flashy, but I led a small team, had good reviews, and was up for a promotion that would finally give us some breathing room. My brother helped by introducing me to a friend of a friend at an industry event and then spent half the night telling stories about my quirks, as if he were roasting me at my own birthday. He called it keeping it real, but the guy's smile shrank with every punchline. A week later, I was told I was not the right culture fit for the new role. The feedback read like my brother's greatest hits. I stopped telling him anything about work after that. When our son turned 1, we did a low-key party at home. Family only, cupcakes from the bakery down the street, a smash cake moment that left icing in the dog's eyebrows. My brother brought a giant, expensive toy that took up half the living room and required 4D batteries. He set it up himself, filmed the whole thing, and posted it with a caption that made it sound like he'd thrown the party. I pulled him aside and told him to cut it out. He rolled his eyes and said, "You're welcome for making it memorable." He left early, texting a later, "Had fun today? You're doing amazing, Mama." She showed me because we didn't hide things. At least I thought we didn't. Look, I know how this sounds, like I let a million paper cuts turn into an infection because I wouldn't amputate. I kept thinking I could manage it, that if I learned the right combination of silence and smiles, I could keep the peace. I told myself that confronting him would blow up the family and hurt A, and my parents would take his side anyway, because that's what they do. There's a special kind of exhaustion reserved for people who are asked to be the bigger person so often they vanish. We tried therapy, A and me. We talked about boundaries and scripts. Our therapist asked what would happen if I told my brother no and meant it. I said he'd escalate. She asked, "What's he escalating toward?" I didn't have an answer. I have one now. Summer rolled around. My brother was between jobs again. He had a new startup idea that sounded like a mad lib. Subscription-based something marketplace synergy, seed round soon. He spent a lot of time at our place because we had air conditioning and snacks, and because A is the kind of person who can't watch someone sweat without offering a glass of water. I started catching little moments that didn't ping as dangerous then, but replay in my head now with sirens. A laughing too hard at a story I'd heard 12 times. His hand lingering on her shoulder when he passed behind the couch. A silence between them when I walked in that took half a second too long to break. I told myself I was paranoid. I told myself my history with him had made me see ghosts in daylight. I told myself I trust my wife. And I did. I still want to. Then came the weekend at my parents' lake place. It was supposed to be a reset. Fresh air, boat rides, my dad's overcooked burgers, my mom's clumsy attempts at group photos where someone is always blinking. The first night, after everyone went to bed, I went back to the kitchen for water. I heard voices on the deck. I recognized both. I stood in the dark and listened to the cadence of them. Her soft is charming, you know me. And something cold settled into my spine. I didn't catch the words. I caught the tone. I went back to bed and lay there next to A, counting her breaths, counting the boards in the ceiling, counting every time I'd chosen peace over clarity. The next morning, my brother suggested a hike. I said she'd join him. I said the baby needed his nap. They looked at each other before looking at me. 2 beats, a shared script. My brain made a note and then buried it under logistics. Diaper bag, sunscreen, lullabies. I'm not proud of what I did next. I checked her phone when she was in the shower that night. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. That's a lie. I was looking for assurance that I'm crazy. Instead, I found a folder in her photo app labeled Screenshots. Nestled between recipes and baby sleep charts were messages from my brother from months before, from days before, from hours before. Most were nothing. Some were not nothing. Flirty jokes that could be brushed off as playful if you're generous. A selfie of him at our door with the caption, "Let me in, it's cold," with a winking emoji. Her reply, "Doors open." I closed the app. I opened it again. I told myself there was context I didn't have. I told myself to ask her in the morning when I wasn't shaking. I didn't ask in the morning. I carried it like a hot coin in my mouth while we did pancakes and sunscreen and don't let him near the dock without a life jacket. I watched them the way you watch a magician after you've learned the trick, seeing the misdirection, the hand to pocket, the flourish that hides the theft. When we got home, I told A I wanted some space from my brother. I said I needed a month with no drop-ins, no texts, no just checking in. She looked relieved and then guilty. She said, "That's fair." She didn't ask why. That felt like an answer. I didn't sleep much that week. I did the dishes loudly. I folded laundry like it wronged me. I was not fun to live with. I kept asking, "Are you okay?" I kept saying, "Yeah, just tired." I thought if I could line up enough courage, I could ask a clean question and get a clean answer, and then we'd deal with it like adults. I underestimated how messy truth can be. Here's the thing. If my life with my brother was a war, I thought I knew the perimeter. He took jobs. He took friends. He took my reputation and my calm. He took my freaking Lego minifigure. And I kept rebuilding. I kept telling myself, he can't take the things that matter. Then came the night I found the one thing even he shouldn't have touched. It wasn't an explosion. It was a detail, small, ordinary, impossible to unsee once noticed. A doctor's appointment reminder that didn't match what A had told me. A receipt in the junk drawer. A date that overlapped with a day she said she was with her sister. And a name in a place it didn't belong. I wish I could tell you I confronted them right there. That I flipped the table like a dramatic TV husband and got the truth in a clean, ugly burst. That's not how it went. What happened next took days, then weeks, then months. It took paperwork. It took words I'd never planned on saying out loud. It took me apart. And if you're still reading, I'm sorry for dragging you through years of background. But I need you to understand the pattern before I show you the break. Because the worst thing my brother ever did wasn't a prank, a smear, or a stolen promotion. What he did next was the kind of betrayal that doesn't just ruin a day or a job, it reshapes your entire life. I said last time that the break in the pattern started with a detail. Here it is. The appointment reminder was for a paternity consultation. I saw it because they asked me to grab a photo of our son from her email, and the notification popped up on her screen while I was scrolling. Same clinic where we did our prenatal classes, different department. Date, 2 weeks from then. Title line, questions about establishing paternity. I stared at it so long the screen dimmed and reflected my own face back at me like a suspect mugshot. I didn't confront her that night. I washed dishes like they were the problem. I checked and rechecked the reminder on her phone to make sure I hadn't hallucinated. I tried to rationalize. Maybe it was generic paperwork. Maybe a friend had asked her to come along. Maybe it was a glitch. The brain is a talented liar when the truth would end your life as you know it. The next morning I made coffee and asked a carefully neutral question. Hey, what's on your calendar this month? She rattled off the usuals: work meetings, daycare volunteer day, dinner at my parents'. She did not mention the clinic. My heart wobbled and then tried to crawl behind my lungs. I said nothing. Then I said everything, but to a lawyer. I booked a consult after work, walked into a beige office with diplomas on the wall and a box of tissues placed exactly equidistant between the chairs. I told a stranger the worst sentence I could imagine. I think my brother might be my son's biological father. The lawyer didn't flinch. She slid the tissue box closer as if she were sliding me a life raft. She explained things I never wanted to know: how presumptions of paternity work, how timelines matter, how DNA tests can protect you and also hurt you. If you're on the birth certificate, she said, you're presumed dad. If you want to challenge that, there's a process. But understand that if you disestablish paternity, you could lose not only obligations, but rights. Access. The word access lodged in my throat like a fishbone. I nodded because I didn't trust my voice not to break into splinters. I went home and looked at my sleeping son. He was sprawled sideways across his crib like a tiny thief who stole all the space. His eyelashes were ridiculous. His mouth did that soft, oh, babies do when they're dreaming of bottles or clouds. My chest did something I can't explain. Love is a physical force. It moves furniture in your ribcage. I told myself I would confront it that weekend when we had time, space, privacy. Life did not cooperate. 2 days later, my brother texted me. Need to talk. Man to man. He didn't send those words. He fired them like a flare gun. I stared at the message for 5 minutes. I wrote and erased 12 replies. I ended up typing, now is fine. He showed up 20 minutes later like he lived down the block from my threshold. He didn't sit. He didn't joke. He looked, not contrite exactly. More like someone about to deliver bad news and hoping the messenger doesn't get shot. You're going to find out, he started. No hello, no apology, just a preamble to catastrophe. And I'd rather it come from me. I didn't say what. He looked past me into the living room like the couch might interrupt him. It happened once, he said. I laughed. It sounded like furniture being dragged across tile. Once, I repeated, because people who insist on once are usually scaling down a mountain of times. He swallowed. I'm not going to defend it. I'm not going to. I'm not here to make excuses. I was in a bad place. She was. Don't you dare finish that sentence, I said, and my voice came out low and steady like it belonged to the man I had begged myself to become. He nodded too fast. Right. Okay. Look, it was a mistake. It shouldn't have happened. When? I asked. He hesitated for the first time. Before the baby, he said, and the room tilted 6 degrees. The world slowed the way it does in car accidents. I could hear the fridge humming, the dog's nails on the hallway floor, a car outside rolling over gravel. I could also hear my life collapsing, and the sound it made was quiet. You need to leave, I said. I'm not finished. You're finished. He didn't move. There's a test scheduled. She wanted to make sure before we told you. I repeated, and the word snapped in half. Get out. He left. He didn't slam the door. He didn't say sorry. He left like a man who had dropped a package and preferred not to be present for the explosion. I came home to a house that had rearranged itself. I was sitting at the table with nothing in front of me like I had been summoned there by a judge. We need to talk, I said. The way people in movies say it right before credits. She sat. Her hands trembled just enough to make the salt shaker sing a tiny glass song. Is he the father? I asked. No overture. No softening agent. I couldn't afford euphemisms. She shut her eyes like the answer was on the backs of her eyelids. When she opened them, tears were already collected in the corners like dew. I don't know, she said, and I didn't know a sentence could hollow a person out that fast. She told me what I had already learned in the worst way. It started as emotional cheating, the texting, the venting, the he just gets me, Infestation disguised as connection. She said she felt lonely. She said I had been distant. She said the baby, the stress, my brother's relentless presence in our orbit had warped her judgment. She said a lot of things I could analyze for the rest of my life and never find peace in. And then she said the only sentence that mattered. There was one night. The timeline bled into the conception window like watercolor. She had been counting days on her fingers, on apps, on the ceiling at night. She had been waking up at 3 a.m. to stare at the curve of our son's cheek and do probability equations in the dark. I wanted to stand up, and I wanted to shove the chair into the wall, and I wanted to run for miles, and I wanted to hold my son forever, and I wanted to be a better man than the one my brother had trained me to be, reactive, brittle, cruel. Somehow, I stayed seated. "We're doing the test," I said. She nodded. "I already scheduled it." The day we went to the clinic was sunny in that aggressively cheerful way that feels like a personal insult. The waiting room had a fish tank. Our son pressed his hands to the glass and squealed at a yellow fish that ignored him. I filled out forms that asked for father's name in stark, unfriendly fonts. They took swabs. They took my dignity. They told us it would be 7 to 10 business days, like they were talking about shipping a blender. Those days did not feel like days. They felt like being stuck in an elevator with time while it breathed in my face. I went to work and pretended to be a person. I came home and pretended to be a father without auditioning for the role of grief. I sang the bedtime song I always sing, and my voice cracked on safe and sound. Anna closed her eyes like closing them could help us skip to the part where this was all a misunderstanding. On day 8, the clinic called. I was in the parking lot at the grocery store, sitting in my car with an open bag of carrots I had no intention of eating. The voicemail started with, "We have your results," and my brain swam away from my skull. I called back with fingers that didn't feel like mine. The counselor spoke in soft, clinical language, the verbal equivalent of gloves. "The probability of paternity is 0%. She paused to let it land. It didn't land. It detonated and rearranged the landscape. 0%. You'd be amazed how loud a number can be. I sat in my car and listened to white noise that might have been my pulse. People pushed carts past me, arguing about brands of cereal. Somewhere a kid laughed. Somewhere else someone honked in irritation. The sky went on being the sky like it hadn't just swallowed me. I drove home and didn't remember any of the lights. A saw me come in, and her face told her the answer before my mouth did. She sat on the stairs because standing was too ambitious for that kind of news. We didn't speak for a long time. Then we said the useless things couples say when language fails. "I'm sorry. I know. I'm sorry. I know." We told my parents that weekend. I don't know why we did it then. Maybe because secrets rot faster in summer. Maybe because I wanted witnesses to the unbelievable. My mother cried the way houses creak in storms. My father went quiet in a way that felt like a verdict. My brother did not show his face at that meeting. He sent a text to the family thread, "We should all calm down first." My mother typed "please" 8 times in a row like it could knit us back together. It couldn't. The next months were a montage I never wanted. Lawyers, mediators, spreadsheets, split schedules for a child I no longer had a name for without hurting myself. My lawyer reminded me, again, that if I disestablished paternity, I would likely lose rights to visitation. "Courts vary," she said. "But be aware, the same test that frees you can also cut you out." I had never hated being freed so much. I asked if we could delay the legal steps. She said she needed time. I said I did too. Time is expensive in a house where every clock is counting down to a catastrophe you didn't cause. We tried counseling. We tried not making eye contact. We tried pretending to be okay for the sake of a boy who thought peekaboo could fix anything. We failed at all 3. One night, my brother came over uninvited. He had that look he gets when he's decided on a version of events and is here to distribute it. "We should talk about co-parenting," he said, using a word that made my stomach flip. "We?" I asked again, and this time the word didn't snap, it vaporized. He talked about logistics like we were forming a committee, days of the week, daycare pickups, holidays. He used phrases like, "in the best interest of the child." He had done his homework. He was speaking a language designed to sound noble while stealing a man's oxygen. I asked him if he loved her. He didn't blink. "Yes." I asked her the same question later. She cried before she answered. "I don't know what I feel," she said, which is what people say when they've already made choices their language hasn't caught up to yet. my lawyer filed the paperwork. I moved into the guest room. For 2 weeks, our lives were a series of handoffs and small cruelties. She would come into the kitchen while I was making eggs and freeze because the pan was the one he'd bought. I would put our son in the glider and realize my brother's hands had carried it across this floor. It felt like living in a museum of artifacts from a civilization that ended because someone rewrote the map. The day the court recognized the DNA results, I took off my ring in the parking lot. I didn't do it for effect. There was no audience. It just felt like the moment in a play when a character sets a prop down and the plot can finally admit what it's been doing. We separated. The divorce started itself like a machine that had been plugged in for months, humming, waiting for someone to press on. Papers were served on a Tuesday. The dog barked. The baby slept through it. I stood in the kitchen holding documents while pasta water boiled and thought about how comedy and tragedy share a wall. This will sound like melodrama, but it's just a fact. There is no pain like loving a child you might have to stop seeing because a piece of paper says he is not yours. I went to every pickup I could while we were in legal limbo, every bath, every book, every silly song. I took mental Polaroids like my life depended on it. What I didn't do was beg my brother for time like he was some benevolent king granting me minutes in my own story. I refused to turn myself into a petitioner at his door. He didn't have that hesitation. He started showing up with a new certainty, the performative humility of a man who believes he's finally earned something he always wanted. He called himself Uncle Transitioning to Dad, a phrase so grotesque I had to leave the room to keep from throwing up. My parents fractured along lines I didn't know were there. My mother invited A to talk it out, over tea like forgiveness was a beverage. My father avoided my brother with the same determination he used to avoid vegetables. Dinners became logistics projects. Birthdays were battlegrounds a Pinterest board couldn't decorate out of being tragic. In the middle of this, real life had the audacity to continue. Work still expected deliverables. The landlord still expected rent. Friends still texted links to dumb memes and asked, "How are you guys?" In the plural, because changing pronouns is hard when hearts are involved. I said we're hanging in. It was not the truth. The truth was that I was unraveling. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose. I started running at night until my legs felt like wet rope. Sleep became a rumor. The day the divorce finalized, the judge read through terms that sounded like someone else's weather report. I cried quietly. I didn't. The pen felt heavy when I signed my name. Afterwards, in the hallway, we stood 3 feet apart, like people waiting for a train that would take them to different continents. She whispered, "I'm sorry." I said, "Me too." The echo of vows lived in that corridor for a moment and then climbed into the vents and disappeared. I moved out 2 weeks later. She took half our plates, the good towels, the basil plant that I'd managed not to kill. She took our son's clothes and his favorite stuffed bear. The glider stayed because it wouldn't fit in her new place. I couldn't look at it without feeling my ribcage malfunction. For a while it sat like a monument in the corner. Eventually, I dragged it onto the curb where people put broken shelves and old dreams. It was gone by morning, claimed by someone who will never know it once rocked a man into silence. My brother helped her move. Of course he did. He carried boxes labeled kitchen and books and Sam, not his real name, up 3 flights of stairs while neighbors held doors and made polite small talk with the man who had detonated a family and still somehow found the breath to say thanks, man. He posted a photo later. Nothing obvious, just 2 coffee cups on a windowsill with a caption about new beginnings. People double-tapped. People wrote, "So happy for you." People have no idea what they're applauding most of the time. After that, contact became a spreadsheet. My lawyer asked me to decide, challenge the certificate and risk losing all legal ground to see my son, or keep it and chain myself to obligations for a child who legally and biologically wasn't mine. I chose self-preservation because I was told that was healthy. It felt like treason. The day the court acknowledged the change, a clerk somewhere moved a digital toggle from father to not father, and the state exhaled a box-checking sigh. The next morning, my house was silent in a way that made my ears ring. I picked up toys that no longer belonged to me. The carpet still held dents where the playpen used to be. I found a tiny sock under the couch and sat on the floor holding it like it could solve a riddle if I were gentle enough. I grieved in unphotogenic ways. I forgot to eat. I memorized the sound the mail made hitting the floor. I went to the grocery store and got stuck staring at the apples because they always picked Honeycrisp. and suddenly the variety felt like a betrayal. I deleted the app that tracked naps and feedings and stood over the trash can with my phone like a man about to amputate something necessary without anesthesia. Friends tried. Some said the wrong thing with gorgeous sincerity. At least you found out now. Everything happens for a reason. You'll find someone else. Others said nothing, which was worse. A few showed up without commentary and wiped down my counters and took me for walks. One friend sat on the floor with me, and we counted the slats of sunlight on the rug like that was a task. Bless him forever. Weeks turned into a kind of time that isn't on calendars. My brother and I made a performance of normalcy. They did daycare pickups together. They learned each other's coffee orders. They brought our son to the park I used to take him to and stood in the spot where I used to stand and posted a photo with a caption that used the word family. I blocked them for a while because I wanted to live. When I did see my son, because I offered, not because I had any right left to demand, I was careful. I didn't promise anything. I didn't say daddy. I didn't cry into his hair. I let him show me his new toy truck and pretended not to notice that he had started calling my brother Dada. Not his name either, but close enough to reality to carve me open. I went home and lay on the floor because the couch felt too adult for that level of wreckage. And still, the world kept turning. Rent was due. The dog needed vaccines. The car made a noise I couldn't afford to diagnose. I worked more. I slept less. I honed the skill of looking okay enough for colleagues to stop asking questions. I told my parents I couldn't be around my brother. My father grunted like agreement had weight. My mother tried to schedule holidays like conflict could be defeated by Google Calendar. Christmas Eve with you, Christmas Day with them. We'll do brunch on the 27th, she said, as if offense and defense take turns like polite board game players. I told her I wasn't a chess piece. She cried. I apologized for making her cry about her own sons. That's my default role in this family. Apologize for bleeding on the floor after someone else cuts me. If you're looking for a grand gesture in this part of the story, there isn't one. Betrayal isn't fireworks. It's corrosion. It's realizing the foundation was cracked and every step you took together widened it, until one day the floor gave way and gravity did what gravity does. The last time A and I spoke without lawyers, we were in the parking lot of the pediatrician's office, trading Tylenol dosage tips like old war vets trading stories about weather. She looked tired. I'm sure I did too. She said, I wish we could go back. I said, to when? She didn't have an answer because there wasn't a safe place to rewind to. The rod had been in the beams longer than either of us wanted to admit. After that, radio silence. They leaned hard into their new beginning. I leaned into survival. I made a budget. I sold the couch. I learned to cook one decent meal on Sundays and eat it until Thursday. I put my ring in a drawer I don't open. I changed the locks and then changed my mind and changed them again. If this were a movie, a twist of fate would arrive right here like an Amazon package the plot ordered. In real life, it came slower, and then all at once, and not from where I expected. People imagine karma as thunder. Mine arrived as paperwork. My dad asked me to meet him at his office. Strange already. Difficult talks in our family usually happen in garages. He had 2 mugs out, a folder on the desk, and this sentence loaded like a confession. I've been a coward. Inside the folder, emails, texts, highlights of every time my brother weaponized family to pry open a wallet. Then a second binder, formal letterhead, ribbon tabs, and numbers that made my jaw go quiet. My parents had amended their revocable living trust. My brother was out. I was sole beneficiary. Total estate, $2 million. I waited for the caveat. None came. My mom stepped in, eyes swollen but steady, set down a container of soup because she can't arrive anywhere empty-handed, and said, we failed you. We believe the prettier story. We're fixing what we can. They'd also funded a separate grantor trust, $1,000,000 wired now, so I didn't have to wait for grief to turn into probate. The lawyer broke it down in calm, lemon-cleaner tones. Co-trustee status, tax implications, beneficiary designations, boring brilliance. She even slid over a 1-page flowchart titled, What Happens If Someone Loses Their Mind Online? With neat arrows from harassment to restraining order to consequences. I walked out with documents, soup, and a key to a life where panic wasn't the default. I didn't buy a car or a victory vacation. I bought time. I made a repair list. Housing. I left the echoing apartment and bought a modest house with sunlight and a room that didn't double as a breakdown spot. I painted one wall a calm blue the store called Harbor and decided to believe it. The first night, I slept 8 hours. The silence felt earned instead of empty. Debt. Paid off the last humiliations. Cards, medical leftovers, student loans. Called the collections line I dreaded and listened to a robot say balance. 0. I cried into leftover soup. Work. Took the certification I'd shelved for later, built a small consultancy, and learned the luxury of firing disrespectful clients. Meetings feel different when need isn't sitting on your shoulder whispering be small. Legal. My lawyer sent 2 letters. To my brother. No contact, counsel only, trespass equals police. To a ex-wife and offer to discuss healthy boundaries if she ever wanted me in the kids' orbit as a friend of the family. Future. Low-cost index funds, a high-yield account labeled Grace so I could say no without flinching. Monthly donations to legal aid and a fatherhood nonprofit that helps men who get DNA test whiplash. I set up a UTMA account for the kid, locked, boring his. I would only pay providers directly, pediatricians, daycare, shoes, if they asked. No cash to my brother. Ever. I named the internal category decency, so my budget remembers what money is for. My parents held their line. Locks changed at the lake house. My dad installed a doorbell camera despite once announcing cameras make a house feel like a prison. Now it felt like parole. They mailed my brother a letter. Love, consequence, no access. He tried the usual maneuvers. Vague posts about greedy relatives, DMs about chosen family. A podcast where accountability meant sighing into a microphone. I didn't chase every lie with an essay. Peace is sometimes strategic silence. Meanwhile, the most shocking change wasn't the money. It was the absence of panic. My brain, freed from calculating what if, remembered music, sleep, appetite. I swam at the public pool because catastrophe is quieter underwater. I cooked for friends. I learned my neighbor's cat, Pickles, tyrant, ignores fences. I started a ritual. Morning coffee on the steps, 5 minutes of doing nothing. It felt illegal at first. Then it felt like oxygen. I met someone decent, a teacher with a slow laugh and a policy of telling the truth even when it wrinkles plans. We're careful. Grief lives in my house like a tenant I'm slowly evicting. But joy shows up on time lately, and that's new. As for A, we traded careful texts about the kid. Fevers, shoe sizes, a video of him mispronouncing ambulance. We keep it kind and practical. Romance ended. Decency didn't have to. When she once apologized for dragging you through hell, I wrote back, you didn't build the furnace alone. It was the right amount of true. My brother's finances did what glass does when it meets gravity. The content venture fizzled into DM me for coaching, then into another job that didn't love references. He started knocking on old doors. Which brings me to noon, a diner, and the question he asked without blinking. You going to help? I wanted witnesses and daylight. So I chose a diner with parking lot cameras and pancakes that taste like insurance. He arrived late in a suit that thought it was humid. The smile tried, saw me, and called in sick. He asked for $30,000, a bridge. You won't even feel it, he said, like empathy was a line item. I slid him a paper, not a check, a curated list of a rehab, a workforce program, a financial counselor, a fatherhood class, and my lawyer's info. This a joke. You asked for help. This is help. He tried the apology shape. I was in a bad place. She was. Stop blaming the weather for the arson. He pivoted to the lever. He thinks I'm dad. Kids are expensive. I handed him proof of the UTMA and explained the rules. I'll pay providers directly for kid needs. No cash to him. Ever. Boundary, not punishment. He stared like I'd handed him broccoli at a birthday party. He threatened to go public. I invited him to enjoy the comments and reminded him that defamation isn't just a vocabulary word. I don't litigate my life for people who love a good pile-on more than facts. Final terms, spoken calmly. Written already. No contact unless it's about the kid and through counsel. Show up at my house and I call the police. Show up at our parents and you meet a lock and a camera. If he wants money, it's no. If he wants help, the list is his. He tested the fence anyway, ringing my doorbell at dusk to perform contrition for the camera. I logged the incident and went back to watering plants. I texted the next morning. I told him not to. If the UTMA is real, Thank you. I sent a redacted statement and paid a pediatric dentist directly that afternoon. No victory lap, just a receipt and a quiet exhale. A week later, the clinic called. They needed someone local to grab the kid while she got 4 fluids for dehydration and a panic episode. Old reflexes fired, new boundaries held. I picked him up. We sang the wheel song twice because toddlers believe in repetition like religion. At the ER, my brother saw me holding his son and mistook proximity for surrender. Give him to me. He said it to me, not to the child. I kissed the kid's head, the quickest sacrament, and handed him over. Wanting and choosing aren't the same, I said. I choose boundaries. And I choose to help when it actually helps. A mouthed thank you from the chair, wrist taped, the color returning to her face. A nurse gave me that look people give men who show up without fanfare. Not applause, just recognition. I drove home and put the discharge bracelet in a drawer with other true things. He tried one last driveway ambush. $3,000 for rent. Don't punish a kid to punish me. I pointed to the laminated sheet I keep by the door. Therapists, job programs, shelters that treat men like humans. I'll fund daycare and medical bills directly. I won't fund you. The dog took one step forward, conversational and convincing. My brother took one step back, called me heartless, and left. I filed a brief with my lawyer documenting the attempt. Paper is a better memory than anger. Here's the decision in plain English. No cash to my brother. Yes to kid expenses paid directly, daycare, medical, necessities, when A asks. Yes to the locked UTMA I control until he's grown. Statements shared with A, not him. No contact except through counsel, and consequences for boundary jumping. Yes to guarding my parents' new boundary like they finally learned to guard mine. Yes to living a life that isn't a rebuttal. I swim. I work. I host dinners where no one is the punchline. I send my mom photos of roasted potatoes. She treats them like a trophy. Some of you will say money obligates me. It doesn't. It equips me to be generous where it helps and firm where it hurts. I'm not starving him to watch him crawl. I'm refusing to sponsor the next fire. If he wants transformation, there's a map. If he wants a bailout, the bank is closed. My parents are steady. Holidays are smaller, kinder. Sometimes we eat lasagna from the pan on a towel because plates feel performative. Sometimes we sit in good silence. My dad, 2-cry lifetime average, told me he's proud of my no. I'm keeping that sentence like a medal in a drawer. A and I are functional. We exchange invoices and photos with hair sticking up like static. We do not exchange opinions about each other's choices. It's not denial. It's a treaty that keeps the kid out of our war. As for my brother, he'll either learn a new script or keep auditioning the old one for smaller crowds. Either way, I'm out of the theater. I don't need the last word. I needed the last boundary, and I set it.